Welcome back. Iran has been in the global headlines for much of the past year over its bellicose president and his war of words with the Bush administration over Tehran's nuclear program. In most people's minds, the Iranian-American conflict dates back to 1979 and the revolution that led to the establishment of the Islamic Republic. However, this is a story that actually goes back much further than that. The Listening Post's Sinead O'Shea now on the coup d'etat of 1953 and the role that the CIA and the Iranian media played in it, as well as the repercussions that are still being felt today.
This is what a 21st century propaganda war looks like.
These people are out to kill us.
Criticized the United Nations for remaining silent on Israel's crimes against Palestinians.
We should have bombed somebody.
24-hour news channels from the West, beaming out the Bush administration's line on regime change in Iran. Iranians fighting back through the media outlets they control. But it's not the first time the media have been used in a foreign push to change the government in Tehran. It happened in August 1953, when the Iranian press was manipulated to help topple the country's democratically elected government, led by Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh.
The strategy of the CIA and the British was to actually bribe both politicians and the media to bring down the Mossadegh's government.
Nobody really knows how many reporters were on the payroll, although we did have an authoritative estimate that at least 70% of the newspapers in Tehran were directly or indirectly being bribed by the CIA during this period.
Mossadegh had just nationalized Iran's oil, wrenching it away from the British. The Americans needed convincing to join a coup effort, so the British played the Red Scare card. It was the early days of the Cold War, and this made an impact on the Americans, who feared Iran could be ripe for a communist takeover.
Any direct military intervention by the United States would risk a counter intervention from the Soviet Union, and that could spiral out of control into a nuclear holocaust. So the United States was looking for another way to shape events in foreign countries.
The result was a new, more subtle model for regime change. The world's first media coup, aimed at reinstalling a puppet monarch, the Shah of Iran.
The role of the media in Iran and the role of the Iranian journalists is astonishing when you think of it, that they were easily bribed with a few $1,000s to go against their own government. And I think that is a shame on the newspapers, those who were involved in the coup.
Operation Ajax, as the coup was called, was run by Kermit Roosevelt, a senior CIA officer in the Middle East at the time. Roosevelt wrote a detailed report on what happened, a document that was declassified in 2000. In it, he described the anti-Mossadegh newspaper articles written as grey propaganda. He talked about the political cartoons that demonized the Prime Minister, and he revealed that it wasn't just Iranian journalists who were behind the articles.
Many of the articles that were published in the Iranian press were actually written in Washington by the CIA, translated and sent to Iran, and then the Iranian journalists just put it in their paper.
There was almost no slander you could imagine against Mossadegh that did not appear at some point in some of these newspapers. These newspapers would churn out articles day after day about Mossadegh being a spy, a homosexual, a Jew, weak, corrupt, anything that they thought would undermine his image.
The involvement of the media was substantial. We have, for example, a New York Times reporter named Kenneth Love at the time who was covering the event in Iran. So he was, if not extremely naive, some people assume he was himself a CIA agent because he, among other things, he personally directed some of the coup plotters' tanks to go to Mossadegh's home and assist in the arrest of Mossadegh. We have the BBC who broadcast the secret code to convince the Shah that the British were behind this coup and were supportive of it. I don't think you can get any more involved in the foreign policy than these examples.
He said, no, let them write what they want. He specifically said this, these are his own words, let the press be free, let them even write against me. That is a part of, belief in democracy and to have free press.
The first stage of the coup failed and the Shah actually fled the country. Then the CIA and others at the US Embassy in Tehran went into overdrive. The resulting destabilization led to the Shah's return to power.
Former Premier Mossadegh's ruined house is a mute testimony to 3 days of bloody rioting, culminating in a military coup from which the one-time dictator of Iran fled for his life.
The Shah's increasingly autocratic rule lasted until the Popular Revolution that ended with the establishment of the Islamic Republic in 1979. Resentment with the Shah and his US allies had reached a climax. Then, a group of Iranian militants, fearing a repeat of 1953, took matters into their own hands. They stormed the US Embassy, the same building Roosevelt engineered the coup from, and took American diplomats hostage.
At this time in Iran, 50 Americans are still held captive, innocent victims of terrorism and anarchy.
The resulting crisis lasted more than a year, but when the Western media reported on that story, the symbolic significance of the embassy and the importance Iranians attached to the building was mostly left out of the story.
Every day you saw pictures throughout America of Iranians in the street denouncing the United States, angry in the street, basically showing their emotions against the United States. And the media didn't explain why people were angry. The viewer in America basically came to the conclusions that Iranians were overly emotional, overly angry, erratic.
I don't think there was a real desire on the part of the American press to get inside the minds of Iranians and understand how they were thinking, what they were doing. It was much easier to paint them as blind, nihilistic fanatics. Once you start to think maybe these people have a reason for doing what they're doing, it makes you think maybe what we're being told about why we are behaving as we are isn't quite true.
Even today, Iranian media continually relives the 1953 coup.
This is the reason why Iran does not allow open media, or one of the reasons. It's because they realize that the CIA will take advantage of a free press and wind up subverting it and bribing editors and newspaper reporters to weaken the regime.
The overthrow of Mossadegh caused a fundamental rupture between the Iranian people and the United States. Until then, the United States was viewed as sort of a benign power that could actually be beneficial to Iran. After that, the United States basically joined the same ranks as the Russians and the British imperial forces, and that was a significant harm in the perception of Americans by Iran.
The everyday lives of Iranians are still impacted by 1953. Their government's precautions against another foreign intervention has left Iranians without many personal freedoms, an open press being just one of them.
Finally, here at the Listening Post, we've often featured the work of Jib Jab, the satirical political website that first came to fame in the 2004 U.S. presidential elections and is being heard from again this time around. The question is, does John McCain have the right political moves for the job? The answer is in our Internet Video of the Week. We'll see you next time at the Listening Post.